A choppy grind higher last week. Can we test all-time highs or do we see a pullback first? Here's what I'll be watching this week. Last week was very choppy after the Thanksgiving rally, and ES essentially started the week by consolidating in a box or a balance range between 6,800 and 6,854 with a trappy mid pivot at 6,824. Now this was a pretty asymmetric box that never really managed to see continuation back down to the bottom of the range at 6,800. Instead, we did see some two-way rotations between 6,824 and 6,854 where you had all tests above 6,854 that failed back into the range, then rotated back into 6,824, and every test underneath 6,824 trapped, and then when it reclaimed, it rotated back up to the resistance at 6,854. Later in the week, we finally expanded the range above 6,854, but really saw pretty pathetic continuation above the range resistance. We held above 6,854, trapped below a few times, and then finally saw continuation into 6,902 on Friday, only to put in a look above and fail of the prior swing high from November, and we sold back down towards the top of the range into the close on Friday. So it was a choppy trend higher, but really not a whole lot of momentum to the upside. I think this is a product of how lopsided the range was, and failing to test, typically a true box range will test the bottom of the range and trap below the bottom of the range more times than what we saw. A lot of tests of the top, but really never got true traps underneath the bottom of the range here. And when this happens, that actually provides for a stronger breakout instead of the weak push higher that we ended up seeing, because traps underneath the bottom of the range trap shorts. It allows new longs to accumulate, which ends up providing a much better trend move once the range breaks. So as far as trade setups last week, the best shorts were on any of these traps above 6,854 that ended up failing back into the range. Then some of the better long setups were any of the traps underneath 6,824 that it reclaimed. And we didn't sweep any prior day lows yesterday for some of the better failed breakdowns. We did have a couple overnight lows or intraday lows for failed breakdowns at 6,825 and 6,845 late in the week. So for next week, it could prove a little bit tricky again. It's best to recognize that this asymmetric structure does invite the potential for some retracement, and really a test of 67.96 would allow new buyers to accumulate and really would be more bullish for a run to all-time highs. However, we need to stick with the trend until we get actual weakness and sellers prove something by the failure of a prior day low to actually signal some downside. So the key pivots for next week will be 6902, 6845, 6796, and 6720 to 30. For direct continuation higher, buyers want to defend 6845 and the Friday low around 6854, and then try to clear 6902 for continuation to all-time highs. Now, it could take any number of different paths, but something like this early in the week would probably be the most bullish scenario to play out if we were to test underneath the Thursday or Friday lows and put in a failed breakdown and then defend, and then try to test 6902 and clear 6902 for continuation higher. For the bearish thesis for next week, seller's goal would be to see continuation down off of the look above and fail that we put in Friday. So we had this prior swing high from the middle of November at 6,900, and technically the active structure currently from Friday is a look above and fail, a failed spike above that, and that's what caused that sell-off. So that's active. Sellers would want to see continuation of that and then be able to see failure of the Friday and Thursday lows, and holding below the Thursday low, reoffering on a back test would potentially allow for that continuation down into 67.96 and the prior week low at 68.02. Now, potentially a much larger retracement could occur if we see failure of the prior week low, which would allow for that full rotation back down into 67.20 to 30, the prior breakout point from the Thanksgiving week. On higher time frames, a trap underneath 67.96 or even a back test of 67.20 to 30 would actually be much more bullish for a rally back to all-time highs into the end of the year. As far as the top setups for next week, the first long setup that I would be watching for is a failed breakdown of the Friday low at 68.57. If buyers are able to trap below there and recover, you can look long for rotation in 68.71 and then potentially higher back into 69.02. Also, if the Thursday low fails at 68.36, you'll probably want to look short for that rotation back into the prior week low into that 67.96 area. One other long setup, if we do get larger rotation, I would look for a failed breakdown of the prior week low at 68.02, especially if it traps 67.96 and 68.02 and recovers. You'll want to be long back above that for that reversal into 68.45 and above. If we do test higher early on in the week, that would be a little bit more bearish move to start the week. You could look short. Now 69.02 is weaker, but if we put in another look above and fail above the Friday high that then fails back under 69.02, that could be a short for that rotation once again back down into 68.71. As always, you don't want to worry too much about guessing which way the market's going to go. Just take it one trade at a time, one day at a time, and focus on reacting to what price is doing at each one of these areas and then react to that. That's how I'll be trading ES this week. If you want to trade live with real pros every day, join us at Trade with Insight.